Good morning. What's happening, Sam?
Volume's gone. Hang on.
Alrighty.
We're good.
Well, welcome, Sam, to this very first episode of Cool Intentions.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, thank you for taking the time. Thank you for everybody out there who might be listening or watching. I guess Cool Intentions is sponsored by Arts and Culture and cool people, or people with cool intentions. The whole idea kind of came up because I wanted to give some people that I thought were incredibly cool a platform. And cool shout outs here to Carol from Cool as a Cucumber, one of the people I've worked with a little while ago, because she had this idea of cool being not just cool as in we might understand as 14-year-old teenagers, but like cool as in a much broader sense of the word. And most of that comes down to authenticity and well, good. I want to say good intentions, but good is a moral judgment. So like people who do really interesting stuff, who are unapologetically themselves, people who go out and follow their heart, follow what they think is good and try to influence the world and people in it a little bit like that, either through just being themselves or through specific projects or their work or whatever that might be that they have going on. So that was the idea. I wanted to give people who I think were really cool in that sense of the word a platform so other people could get to know them, could maybe get inspired by who they are or how they do things, or perhaps even join in to any of the work or projects that they have going on. So that's how this came about. The arts and culture bit is really because I'm a big fan, I must say, of lots of different forms of arts and culture, lots of music, books, painting, but also into like graphic novels or comics or like any bit of culture, of storytelling, of that. It's so rich and everybody finds a way to get into it somehow. So I found it's a really good gateway to the soul, like a reflection of who people are, of what they believe in. And ultimately a reflection of, well, what they do in their lives, because who we are, it will influence how we think about things and what we do on a daily basis, how we react to things, how we interpret things. So as a coach, I've seen so many people, and I found that conversations around the kind of arts and culture that they like is a really good way to get to know somebody. So that's how the whole concept came together. And I'm delighted that you offered to just like, immediately like, oh, this is great. I'll happy to test run this with you if you ever want to. And since I think you're really cool, I think that's an excellent first guest. So the only guidance I gave you, as far as I remember, was 10 plus minus, because we never know if we get to 10, depending on how the conversation goes, or if we go beyond it. But roughly 10 pieces of arts and culture from any kind of genre, any kind of form, to start our conversation. And then I'll just, we have a conversation about that. Any pieces of arts and culture that influenced your thinking, your being, your way, like your behavior, your mindset, something that had a profound impact on you. And that's all I asked you. And that's, I assume, what you've brought.
It is, yeah. I've come fully stacked with, not necessarily a comprehensive list, but I would say the most influential pieces of, I guess art and culture as a whole that have guided me on the path to where I am today and changed who I am. Because like the notes I made before we were talking is about how it's influenced my life, how it's changed my perspective or attitude or taught me something of value. So rather than me just think of what's my favorite tune or what's my favorite piece of art, I've gone and looked back at why they had an impact and how they formed the current me.
Cool. So you sent me some links and I have them. So when we introduce something, we might just go listen to the track or maybe check out I don't think there's any paintings in there, but like if there's something we can consume straight away, or that I don't know. We could just maybe have a quick look at it before I ask you to tell us a bit of a story around it.
Sure. Yeah, cool. Well, I guess, in that case, the first one is actually a piece of music. I mean, if you want to click the link, I don't think it actually starts until about 36 seconds in.
It's Ice Cube, right?
It is indeed, yeah. So
I know that tune very well. Jackin' for Beats. The video starts off with a bit of a story, right?
It does, yeah. It's kind of where does one start with this? I guess, hip hop in general has had like quite a big influence on me, and I think this track, or particularly this artist, was my first foray into hip hop. I mean, do you want to play the tune first and then me explain after, or
however you want? Any words of introduction for anybody who's never seen this?
Yeah, I guess I'll preface it with, this is quite a strong entry for the first episode of Cool Intentions, and I did sort of hesitate, and I was talking to Yannick before we started the conversation about,
hey, wait, that's me.
Is some of the stuff going to be too hardcore? But then Yannick's given me the green light to just be me. And although I don't walk around like a gangster and use slang, hip hop has been a massive influence on my life in terms of how my life was before I found it. So I grew up in very sort of, I'm grateful. I'm a single white European male. I grew up in a stable environment, but then came across the concept of hip hop. So I grew up listening to like Queen and Status Quo and all these kind of, I guess, middle of the road rock bands. And then I suddenly discovered hip hop, and it was like, oh my God, what is this stuff? And Ice Cube was one of the first artists I came across. And what we'll do then, I guess we'll play this little track, and then I'll explain why I picked this one and what jacking for beats actually means.
Cool. Let's roll. Jacking for beats. Starting now.
So yeah, there's a bit of Ice Cube for your mornings. And I'm just changing my screen around a bit. So yeah, the reason why I chose that track then. So
hold up, sorry.
Yeah, it's okay now. Rewind.
Right. DOP. Rewind my selector.
I think before we go into that, actually thinking about it, the other thing you asked me about was what's my message in all of this. So I think if we start with the message, if that's okay, then
I think it will emerge.
Okay, cool.
I'm happy for you to throw that message out there and then kind of use that as a line.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'll sum it up in one word then, and it's just create.
Uh-huh.
So I'll leave it at that for now, and then hopefully the themes will come out throughout the rest of the selections. But yeah, just the word, just create.
Wow. Well, hip hop is all about creation, right?
It is indeed, yeah. So the reason I chose that track is jacking for beats. I guess jacking is short for hijacking. And I don't know if people were able to hear from listening to the track, or at least they can do it when they click the link on a later date, is there's a lot of different beats in there. So it goes like for 16 bars on one, then for 8 on another. And essentially the concept of jacking for beats is Ice Cube, like metaphorically, has gone around to all the other hip hop groups and hijacked their music and taken, I like that beat, I'm going to rap over that one. I like this beat, I like this beat. And he's put them all together and made his own version. So this is quite a common, I guess it's quite a common fear with a lot of people, is worrying about stealing other people's stuff or copying. But essentially, most creations are a version of something else that already exists. So this selection comes in because, yeah, not only does it represent the hip hop influence that of taking, I guess sampling culture, taking elements from all different things and creating your own version. So one of the books which I thought about adding into this list was Steal Like an Artist.
Yeah, excellent.
Which is quite a popular one. And I guess I didn't even understand hip hop or what was happening in a lot of the music that I was listening to when I was about 11 or 12. but looking back, I understand it a lot more now and see how it's influenced me going forward. So I guess this was my first foray away from the mainstream and took me into the underground, to a genre which was fairly new at the time. So I think that video is from around like very early 90s. And now I think recently I overheard a stat saying that hip hop has outsold rock for the first time on some sort of Billboard poll. So it's amazing to see how something that started off so crude and almost accidental, it wasn't like someone said, right, I'm going to create a genre. They just did some cool stuff, and then other people went, oh, that's cool. And then the whole culture just has blown up, and like everyone knows what hip hop is nowadays.
Yeah, it's incredible where it came from. I mean, I can very much resonate because I grew up with that as well in 1996, 95 or something. I've really discovered that. I think for me, firstly, was a hip hop group from Stuttgart called Massive Töne, but like that was the Fugees kind of time. And I think it's really interesting because that topic that you brought up of like sampling / stealing / jacking beats, it's a really interesting one, and I've talked about it a lot. There's another really good documentary called Rest in Peace, a remix manifesto, that basically shows how pieces of arts and culture have always been sampled and remixed. Disney has been remixing the 1920s slapstick and like just put a Mickey Mouse on Steamboat Joe, and it's basically a one-to-one copy. But then he started suing everybody for doing exactly the same thing with Disney. So it's really interesting, and like people from well, I wanted to say older generation, but generally people who don't really understand or come from that kind of hip hop sampling mentality, they do tend to say, oh, but that's just stolen. You know, you shouldn't do that. Yeah. And I think that's a really interesting conversation, and that seems like that's definitely something why you picked this tune. Because in reggae, it's very, very common to take somebody else's music and do your own lyrics over it. It's very accepted. In hip-hop, it's much, much less accepted to just take somebody else's beat, but it's been always part of the culture to take something where you found value and then make it your own and like revamp it, even if it's just your own lyrics or your own take of what you're thinking about on top of this music. You know, if something moves you, take it, make it yours, and put it out there again for others to take and make it theirs again. And I think it's a really healthy process, but people get incredibly scared. So I wonder why that was so significant as you were growing up.
Well, I think when I was growing up at the time, I didn't realize how significant it was. But looking back at it now, a lot of the work I've done over the last, I don't know, like probably about the last 5 years has been like a meta hip hop sampling route. So my background was in like music industry and music production. So we'll come on to that a bit later, but it's a case of not just taking influences, but actually taking sections and chunks of certain things and creating using that. So for you to come up with a completely 100% original idea is going to be quite a struggle, because there'll be someone who's done that before somewhere, or a version of. So when people think, oh, it needs to be 100%, I want to create something original, it's probably not going to happen. But that's okay. But you're still creating something original because you're taking elements of other people's creations, adding your twist, spin, vibe, whatever, and then creating something which technically is original because it didn't exist before.
Created, you say?
So a lot of people, yeah, exactly. A lot of people, I'd imagine, and I don't think I was ever like this, but I think a lot of people, they struggle with that concept of not being comfortable using other people's material. Whereas to me, I see it as, well, I like this over here, that works, this resonates with me, let me stick those two together, and that works for me. So to me it's obvious.
Yeah. So where's the line to actual stealing?
That's a good question. I think when you either don't add anything of your own. So if you're taking something and not doing anything with it. So I guess I could use like an audio. Back in my music production days, we would sample stuff, but it was almost like an unwritten rule that you'd have to modify it in some way. So that can either be editing the original or adding something to it to make something different.
Hmm.
So whenever you would sample stuff, you would change it slightly. Obviously, then if you take something in its original form and say, "Hey, I created this,"
Hmm.
internally, that's a battle you're going to have to deal with because you know you're lying,
Ha.
and eventually you're going to get rumbled. And even if you don't, where's the satisfaction in claiming you've done something which you
Mm.
didn't do? There's more inner joy in creating something yourself. That in its the creation process in itself is fulfilling, not
Yeah.
necessarily the adulation or respect or acknowledgement that you can get from that creation. It's the process of creation. It is cathartic and it's enjoyable.
Yeah, I mean, this is super interesting because, like, sometimes, and you know this as a producer as well, you come across this riff, and it's just perfect as it is. It really shouldn't be changed, And in hip hop, it's easy. You just add your lyrics, you add your own
Yeah.
thoughts, But like, I wonder, like, sometimes you come across something that is so round, so well rounded already. You just want to like go spread it and share it. And like sometimes it seems to me that somebody just took something that was already perfect and changed something and they made it less perfect, or they just added something and it's clear they just wanted to add something in order to put it out there under their name. And this is where academia comes in. Academia, you would just reference something and then put it out there as somebody else's, and say, well, this is from this source. And then you could still put something around in, before or after, or like pack it into something, into a story, or give it some context, and then use that perfect little piece.
Yeah.
And I see some samples work like that as well in a break. There's a perfect sample from some Bobby Womack tune, and it makes sense, and it's just like a drum beat on it, and then it goes back into something else.
Yeah, you're right. And the word I was going to say, and you use the exact word, is context. So sometimes you can take it in its original form and leave it as is. But then, if you're adding other stuff around it or embellishing it or improving it, then it becomes your own thing. But I think it's especially what was interesting with my journey with hip hop is I grew up listening to it, and like a lot of people around me, especially my mum, would say, "I don't like all these swear words, Samuel. All these. I don't like the words." I remember saying to her, I said, "I don't really listen to the lyrics much. To me, it's all about the music." And hip hop from the 90s, and I didn't know this at the time, was pretty much all sampled stuff from the 60s and 70s.
Mm-hmm.
So that also gave it context, but they were referencing it. So you can take something of someone else's as long as you reference them. So I guess in academia, it's don't plagiarize it.
Mm-hmm.
But if you reference it and say, "Look, I thought this was great, so much so that I wanted to use it," check out my stuff, but also check out where I got it from.
I know, and this is
a lot of other music from, just reading the credits in, hip hop cassettes back in the day. It said something from. I was like, I just thought that the hip hop guy made this creation. It's like, no, all he did was add his own drum beat, take a bit of music from a soul or R&B song, and did his own thing. Sorry, I interrupted you there, mate.
No, I interrupted you basically. No, but it gets me. I get emotional around this stuff because part of the massive enjoyment I got from digging into where hip hop came from, because a lot of my musical taste is hip hop and where it was sampled from. That's where I started a lot of my journey from the time I was actually consciously listening to music. As like, oh, I really like this because I like it, not because it was just there and I was being fed it or I heard it on the radio. It's like, no, this is stuff that I actually like. And then I listened. I remember countless, hundreds of moments very vividly where it's like, oh my God, this is where they sampled this from. I didn't know that was sampled. Ooh, this is the original. And then you found the original. And just the other day, like 2 weeks ago, I was waiting for my lunch somewhere in Shoreditch at some pasta place. And they played Biggie from 1994, Hypnotized. Not Hypnotized. Oh, fuck's sake. Anyway, that tune, the Biggie tune. And somebody in the shop was like, oh, remix. And I'm like, what?
Yeah.
I know that is already the remix. They're original. I'm like, no, that's the remix.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what are you talking about? Yeah, that's sampled from way back. I just loved finding music like that. The thing is, very often they didn't reference it because the laws are that you cannot just take a certain part, you get yourself into loads of trouble. So loads of the old hip hop artists, they don't sample anymore. You know, De La Soul went into the studio with like 50 musicians and like played all of their own samples and then sampled that. It's not viable financially anymore to sample because the legal situation is so difficult, because the artists are very protective about what they're producing, because you can get sued so easily these days. And I think it's such a shame, and that's why a lot of these references are not given, because people actually, like when I produced my album, I thought about selling it and giving it to labels and actually trying to publish it, but I had to find out that I would have to pay like, I don't know, 200 million or something in like freeing the samples and clearing the samples, and it's just not viable. So I think it's such a shame that we can't just use somebody else's stuff, reference it well, and then add our own twist. But at the other end, I can only also understand that if you've produced something and then somebody else getting absolutely rich based on what you've created, and all they've done was add a drum beat, that's also not right. So I can see the debate, but it's like I don't know. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, well, there's a couple of things in there actually. I think like my preferred era of hip hop ends around that time where sampling kind of disappeared and people would create their own, you know, like musical versions. So, and it is around money, because especially in like when I was making drum and bass, like a lot of budding producers would think, oh, I'd like to sample that, but will I get in trouble? The reality is, hardly anyone's going to hear that tune anyway. You're not going to make any money off it anyway, so no one's going to come running for the money. So it was kind of sad to see in hip hop that when it became big in like probably again like early 90s, that's when people started to think, oh, hang on a minute, if he's making money off this music and he's just used my sample, that's when the lawyers started coming in. It never used to exist. So I'm pretty sure that if the lawyers weren't chasing the money, the hip hop producers would more than happily credit the sources.
Yeah,
got to the stage where people were running for them. So yeah, I guess money is a big thing out of that, because if you're making money off someone else's, that's fair enough. You know, you should credit them and you should give them financial recompense for their original creation. So yeah, I think where money is almost the deciding factor. If you're not making any money off it, I say go nuts. And if it brings exposure to their material, so like there's as part of this hip hop culture, a lot of older artists have been almost like brought back from the dead, because someone's used a sample from one of their songs, and now suddenly the album that they created in 1982, which sold about 40 copies, now a lot of people know about, and they've been buying it. It's been re-released, so they're almost being rewarded in that sense. But yeah, it's a shame. I guess it's where money and art collide, and that's where you get some issues, shall we say.
Especially under the heading of create, in the framework of when you're creating something. That's why hip hop was accessible to absolutely anybody, because you didn't need anything to create anything. If you didn't have your mom's turntable and started doing some scratching or something, you had a mouth, you did a beatbox, and somebody rapped, and you didn't have to write any lyrics. You didn't even need a pen. You know, if you dance, you can dance. You know, anybody could participate, and that's because we could create something out of nothing. You know, we could just take that sample and make it yours, make it relevant again. And I really love that. And it seems that that's something that's very much connecting to you too.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. So I've taken that concept of, influences and sampling, and used it with a lot of my other work, which isn't music related. I mean, I don't actually make music anymore, but I've taken like that meta concept and taken it to my coaching or whatever else I'm doing. It's like, I like what he's done with that, and I like this concept of this. So I'm always looking for other concepts that I can bring in to whatever I'm creating. So I remember reading, because I guess I never thought I was a creative. I just, I labeled myself as one of those left-sided brain analytical thinkers. And then when I realized, after I started making some music, I was like, oh, I am actually a creative. I've created a 4-minute piece of music from nothing that, it didn't exist before. And yeah, it's I remember reading about when I was doing my music creation, just sitting down in front of a machine and you've got a blank canvas, for some people is great, but for me it was like, where do I start? And you would go through, I think there's a process, they call it like scratching, so just sort of fiddling around, playing with a couple of bits of audio, then eventually you'll come across something and it'll go, oh, that sounds cool. But another creative tip they said was go and consume stuff outside of music. So this kind of got me into art and literature, which I guess up until that point I'd never really read books other than what I was told to read in school. Up until I kind of lost my job about 5 years ago. So you'll see a lot of this list doesn't contain many pieces of art or more traditionally cultural things, because I was never into that, growing up. But by taking influence from a piece of art or going to a museum, you can take concepts and think, well, how can I put this into this? And so I'm always looking to merge and create new stuff off, influences and other people's ideas.
Integrating. Yeah, it's interesting that you said the lyrics weren't actually that important, was all about the music, but then you discovered books. Is there one book in particular that simplified or signified the next kind of area? One of those books that really did something to you?
Well, I think the next one on my list kind of takes a bit of a detour, in as much that because I hadn't, like I said, I hadn't read any books up until I was about mid-30s, which I'm amazed I managed to do. And then once, I think what it was is I didn't, when you grow up in like an education system, sometimes, unless like, and my mum was a teacher, so this is almost shedding a crazy light on her. Like, she always encouraged me to read, but I never found the books that I was interested in, because it was like, fantasy isn't really my cup of tea. And I guess self-help stuff, I guess the concept didn't exist to me, and I didn't require any at the time. But when I came across this book, because I think I was struggling with
this book. Sorry, you haven't named it yet.
I haven't yet, no, but I'm getting to that, Yannick. So this came around a time that I think I was struggling. I've been single for a long time, and I was struggling, just interacting with females, for want of a better word. So this book is quite a popular book, which a lot of people might have heard of, and it's called The Game by Neil Strauss. And the book essentially is about a reporter who discovers the world of pickup artists, which essentially are guys that are going to bars and clubs and hitting on girls, and they've come up with strategies and concepts and psychology behind it. And it fascinated me, not only because it was something that I could learn about. It was the first book that I enjoyed reading and I couldn't put down, which I'd never had before. So when people say, oh, I can never put this book down, that was like, really? Like, reading to me at that time was boring.
Yeah.
Because it was like stuff you had to do for school. So this was the first book which opened up a whole journey into reading and learning. And I looked back now and say, this is the first book that got me into personal development.
Yes.
I didn't know at the time, but a lot of it was psychology. So it was learning about how you operate as a human, understanding how other humans operate, and combining those two.
Yeah, that's so interesting, because like pickup artists always get a very bad rap, and most of the time that's probably fair, because the goal is to get women into bed, and like most, I'm not sure most, but like certainly a lot of pickup artists, definitely I would say the majority, at least, of people that I've met, they were really manipulative, but when I came across it, a friend of mine in Berlin had just moved city, and he wanted to meet people. There was no sexual desire. I mean, it was probably but like, he generally just wanted to meet more people and realized this is a way to open up, to start talking to people, to get over your approach anxiety. And you know, there's some tricks in there, and a lot of like these are people are very, very manipulative. But in essence, when the stuff that I've read was definitely about, well, if you like yourself, if you're authentic, if you know who you are, if you know what you're good at, if you get to know yourself and you really like yourself and you have that vibe that you're really at peace with yourself and who you are, and that's the most attractive thing that there is. You know, if you don't necessarily want anybody in particular because you're quite happy with where your life is at right now, you know, that makes you really attractive. And so I think pickup artists, the PUA as they call it, and personal development are very much interlinked because it is about the inner game, right?
Exactly that, yeah. And looking back, I didn't have any inner game at the time. I was sort of, because the book doesn't really go into too much detail about the routines, as they call them, or like the scripts. It's more a journalist who got into that world and he was documenting what he was up to and what he managed to do, which was, I think it was also inspiring because he was a short, bold, nerdy dude, which was kind of like me at the time. I was like, well, if he can do it, then I guess I was influenced by his journey. So that led me off to go and Google a load of stuff about PUA and techniques, and looking back now and connecting the dots and seeing that a lot of that helped me on my journey to become a better conversationalist, but also improve that inner game. And now I look back and think, you can have all the scripts and the routines, but if you're not comfortable with you, or you're not even being you, then it's almost a turn off. It's like the opposite of attraction.
And where do you draw that line between being at peace with yourself and kind of exuding that and straight up manipulating and objectifying women? Because that's the other end of the extreme. And I mean, that's a real thing, that there's people who teach you how to get into people's heads and manipulate them to have sex with you. You know, that's the dark end of PUA.
It is, yeah. And that's a good question. I'm trying to think how I would do it. I mean, I never got to the stage where I was any good at this anyway. This was just like my first foray into, the inner game.
Surely so you've seen openings, right? When you're at a party and you're like, oh, I kind of know what I would need to say next in order to have this or that effect. And I remember freezing a couple of times because as soon as I realized that this is now in the future, I could do this to manipulate somebody. Sometimes I look back and I'm like, oh my God, what just happened was kind of textbook, you know, but amazing things happened and it wasn't my intention. But now that it's about to happen, I have a choice whether, and sometimes it freaked me out because just the awareness it created about me and others and the interaction really put me into some ethically weird spots, because I was like, I don't want to manipulate people and I want to respect like people's agency. But at the same time, I also really like you and I want to show that, but like, what am I going to do now?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's almost like ignorance is bliss, because when you're aware that you're doing something which may be seen as manipulation, you've then got that decision to make. Do I continue? I think it just comes down to intent. You know whether you're manipulating someone deliberately for something for your own gain, or whether you're using it for a mutually beneficial purpose. So like, you know, if you're in a conversation, you are manipulating the conversation. Whatever comes out of your mouth is going to change the direction of it. But if you're doing it to make them feel comfortable, so you can learn a bit more about them and you can deepen your connection, then it is manipulation, but it's in a good way.
It's a cool intention.
Exactly. It's a cool intention, not a cruel intention. I think, that is the distinction there. Are you doing it for a negative or a selfish reason? So it's interesting you talk about when you got to like the stage of doing openers. I never even got that far. I would read all about all this stuff, and it's kind of been my theme for a lot of my life, is I would read about everything but not actually go and do or create. So when you talk about like those thoughts that come into your head when you go up to a group of people, it doesn't even have to be like girls, you know, if you go up to a group that you've never met before,
network event, you know, perfect.
There's that inner voice going, don't do it, what are you doing, you're crazy, they're going to laugh at you. And I never even got that far. So a lot of the work I do now is helping people become aware of those voices, where they come from, and help them come over the psychological blocks.
Yeah.
Because I guess the running theme around the create word is a lot of people know what they want to do. A lot of people know how to do it, but they're still not doing it. And a lot of the time for me, in all the reading I've been doing, is it's psychological. There's usually a fear or a motivation issue driving that. There's other issues which are less psychological, and it might just be like an overwhelm, but which can just be broken down. But to me, the majority of the blocks come from the psychology.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess what I do is help people work with their inner game so they can create, so they can not worry about what other people think, or not worry about if it's not perfect. Because those are kind of the main two themes. So I like to encourage people to create. And I guess that creation in this context doesn't have to be a piece of art or a book. It's you're creating a relationship or a connection or something that's intangible.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, and I mean, there's some processes that work, and I think you're spot on when you say, well, there's a lot of ways of you can build a business, build a relationship, open up a group of people at a network event, or make a girl like you. You can. There's ways to do that. I never practiced openness, but I know that we all have stories that we tell over and over again because they're good stories.
Mm-hmm.
What the pickup artist just did is take that story and apply it strategically. And there's 1,000,001 people in business who do exactly that every single day. They're at a network event and they go and they do their opener. They open somebody up, they exude a higher level and value, and they have a good vibe going, and they're a bit funny, and like they know what they want, and they like themselves, and they're confident, and they have good posture, good body language, and they know to talk, maybe they trained their voice a little bit to sound deeper or more masculine or more feminine or more sexy or more confident. There's voice coaches out there who can help you do these things. There's all of these tools, so it's really interesting what we can actually do with ourselves. And a lot of that is fighting what our head is telling us and what thoughts are coming up. But a lot of that is also just building new habits, or training yourself to say the right things in a job interview, or to start with why, or whatever it might be that we can influence in the way that we approach people. So many interesting possibilities.
Yeah, and I think just the thing that I think I gained a lot from this book was sometimes you look at other people and think, that guy's so charismatic. He was born like that. That's just not me. And I realized, especially when it comes to like social related traits, these are all learnable. There are processes and patterns that you can pick out from a person's behavior that you can reverse engineer. So all of these traits are a learnable skill. So I never, like, as demonstrated, the thought of going up to a group of people 5 years ago, I wouldn't have done it. I'd have known how to do it, but I wouldn't have done it because the psychology was blocking me. Whereas now I've learned the skills, the traits, but also that inner game to be able to just go up to anyone, anywhere, and talk about anything, and it doesn't bother me. Yeah. And if you told me that 5 years ago, I'd have been like, nah, that's not possible. That's just not me.
What's the thing that cracked it? Because I know there will be plenty of people out there listening who are like, well, can you turn a complete introvert into a complete extrovert? Well, sometimes they can do that. I think there's certain limit, but like there will be lots of people out there who are like, yeah, I know all of these success stories, and I know all of these people who tell you, look, I was completely this and now I'm completely that, and you can do it too. Just pay me £10,000 for coaching, or something like that. But like I know there's things that can really shift you, that can really seismically shift you into a new way of being, just by learning some of these techniques and forming some of these habits, using some of these processes and dealing with some of these limiting beliefs and thoughts. Yeah. So what was your secret in that?
Well, I think just the way you explained the way you explained it there kind of gives the impression that it was like a seismic moment, like a one-off, like, I've cracked it. In fact, it can happen like that, but a lot of the times it's exactly the opposite. It's just doing little bit, but it's taking action. So this is something I've learned that was holding me back, is I would learn all this stuff. I would read all this stuff. I'd have all the knowledge, but not actually do anything with it. And paradoxically, in fact, we have a mutual friend, Andreas, who operates the opposite way. He'll go and do it first without reading anything about it.
Yeah.
And it's funny, we had a chat the other day and he would say, oh, I wish I was more like you with like planning and stuff. And I said to him, well, actually, I wish I was more like you because you just get on and do it.
I know.
So in terms of overcoming fears and stuff, I guess, yeah, firstly, it's awareness. You need to know that you have that fear. Ideally, and I guess as a coach, exploring where that fear comes from, but also then taking action and just learning by doing. So just little steps. It doesn't have to be, let's just jump straight in and try and chat up 3 girls at one go. No, let's just go and speak to a stranger on the street and ask him what time it is. That's a process that gets you towards that. And I think it's called like exposure therapy in some cases. So it's not always a seismic shift. It's sometimes just little steps.
Yeah.
But until you start doing stuff, then you do what I say, you open the feedback loop. So then you can say, oh, shit, that worked. And then you do get that little shift of, oh, this is interesting. And then other times you think, shit, that didn't work at all. But then at least you know not to do that again. And you've got some data to realize which path is going to be better next time.
Yeah, and that's very interesting. Somebody told me a story about going to the dentist, and they were in Thailand or somewhere in East Asia. And they went to the dentist because they had some pain in the tooth, and the dentist said, well, okay, we can fix it, not a problem, and it's going to cost you X amount of money, which was kind of horrendous. And he's like, oh my God, like, how much money? That's a lot of money. How long is it going to take? And he's like, well, we can make it slow. It's like, well, you kind of want to have your money's worth, but also you want it to be over quickly, but then it's gonna hurt a lot. And I mean, I think that's a lot of what personal development comes down to as well. If you want to have seismic shifts quickly, you're gonna have to go through some serious discomfort. You're gonna have to really make yourself do things because you're ripping yourself out of your comfortable patterns. If you've never really talked to strangers much, it's gonna be a huge discipline to keep doing it. It's really hard work. And that's why people who really determined and they pay coaches 10 and 20,000 pounds a year or something for like a super intense transformation, they're going to have to put so much work in and really force themselves to do things differently every single day, which is a struggle, So the longer shifts are much more comfortable because you're not seismically disrupting your comfortable flow of what you're used to. Uncertainty and is uncomfortable. We don't know what's going to happen. If we go to especially to strangers, it's still hardwired into our brains that, thousands of years ago, we might meet a stranger and they just take our tools and take our women and take our children and then they're off, for their own benefit. But like in a nightclub, that's probably not going to happen. You might still get punched in the face if you talk to the wrong person because they're just there with a group leader. But generally, a lot of these fears that are still in us, they don't really make any sense anymore. And our brain makes the connection fairly quickly the more often we do these kind of things. If you were to go out 3-4 times a week for the next 3 months and just talk to strangers and start random conversation, very quickly your brain will realize that they're not going to make fun of you. They're probably just going to engage with you. Worst case scenario, maybe somebody makes fun of you. You just go to the next group and they like you. You get better in conversing. You get better at all of these skills. So the brain learns very quickly. That's why these kind of shifts work. But if you want to do a very quick shift, then you're probably going to be quite uncomfortable and it's going to be hard work. That's why a lot of people drop out. It's like, I'd rather stay comfortable. And I think that's where my existential view of happiness comes in, because I don't think we can ever be or stay comfortable if we want to keep developing.
Definitely, yeah. So like 2 of the subjects I've been reading about lately is like Tony Robbins' 6 human needs. And the first one is certainty. And paradoxically, the second one is uncertainty. And that kind of relates into the other thing I've been reading about, which is the comfort zone. So essentially that comfort zone it's your brain keeping you safe, but it's also the thing that's stopping you from progressing or creating that thing. So the concept that I use myself is what I've called the discomfort compass. So if I'm doing something, I'm starting to feel, oh, that's a good sign. That to me is like, okay, wicked, this is where I need to be, because personal development is all about growth and not smashing your comfort zone, but just nudging up against it and going, come on, let's see what we can do. So I think a lot of people maybe don't take action because they think it is going to be a seismic shift or it's going to be a complete overload. It doesn't have to be like that. You can do it in little steps.
Yeah.
So like you do something and then it becomes the norm, your comfort zone expands and then you're comfortable again. Mm-hmm. So it's just little steps. Depends on what you want to do. But if you want, quick transformations, then yes, you will be very uncomfortable. And that's why people pay the money, because it's a support mechanism. It's not a coach saying, come on, do this, do that. You and I both know that's not how coaching works, but we facilitate the platform for them to do it themselves and then essentially make us redundant.
Well, it depends on the coach. Because I think a good coach will know that in that moment where you're doubting yourself and you're like, oh, there's so much discomfort, I don't think I want this anymore. I think a good coach will not just hold that space for you, but also in the right moment might be a cheerleader and say like, come on, you can do this. Like, you know, you want this, you know? I know coaches who are very instructive and very directive in like telling you how to do stuff. And there is an element of coaching that can really work that way. There is a psychoeducation element in cognitive behavioral therapy, for example. There's an educational element. It's like, look, there's some training involved that can be really, really useful at the right time. But most of coaching is really about holding that space when you've decided to change, and trust that you have the answers to know how to change and what to change into. Because when we start becoming directive as coaches or as human beings, really, if you tell your best friend what they need to be doing, you know, it might not be the best thing that they might need right now. Very often, a good friend just needs for you to hold space so they can struggle a bit, you know, and because then afterwards they know they've done it on their own. They know that they've been empowered, not just following somebody else's blueprint. Because really, there's only your own blueprint. And there are things that work. Like I can teach somebody how to approach a stranger and like make more friends if they are up for the discomfort that comes with it. You know, there's ways to do that are systematic and that will work if you follow them. But I believe it's always better if you find your own way of doing that, your own authentic way. You know, not everybody wants to rehearse a story and then go tell it. You know, some people might be up for lying. Some people might be up for not lying ever at all. You know, you really need to find your own authentic style in the way that you do life. And I think this is why by coaching, which is essentially a mix of like the very non-directive therapy and the very directive sports coaching, you know, that's why I think that works so well, because it helps people to find their own authentic, their own cool ways.
And that is a lovely segment into the next book I'm going to mention, Yannick.
Oh, yeah, true.
Yeah. So I couldn't tell whether you were reading that or not, but that's
the list is in the background, and I just glanced over, and I'm like, oh yeah, no, that is perfect.
So the next item on my list is a book by a guy called Seth Godin, who's big in the marketing game, and the book is called The Purple Cow. The Purple Cow, the concept, I guess the idea is that, you know, if you're driving down a country lane and you see a cow and you see another cow, your brain probably doesn't even register. It probably doesn't even go, oh, there's a cow. It just drives by.
The first time. You know, for people who haven't been in the countryside, oh, look, a cow. But after the 10th or 100th.
Exactly. So then when you see a purple cow, you're like, what's that? So it's that concept of being able to stand out from the crowd and I guess be you, which is what the book's about. It's being able to acknowledge being different and owning being different. And I mean, I read this book before I got into my creative pursuits, but now I look back at it and think I've taken a lot from that book, in as much that, especially when it comes to marketing, being you and being the purple cow instead of the black and white cow makes you stand out from the crowd, which can be daunting, but it's also your best marketing tool because you stand out from the noise, essentially.
Yeah, he uses the term remarkable, as in worthy making a remark about. And I thought that was really, really clever, because from a marketing perspective, you want people to talk about whatever it is that you have or who you are or the product you sell. You want people to talk about it because after the TV industrial complex, you needed to have a different style of marketing. If you wanted to be very popular among people, you need people to talk about it. You know? And if you're remarkable, you're worthy making a remark about. If you're very different, immediately our attention is drawn to it. You know, it might scare us a little bit. It might make us feel uncomfortable, you know, because it's different. It's like uncertainty. It's like, oh, that's different. That's not like me. We like similar things, but we are drawn, our attention is drawn to things that are different.
Yeah. And I think rather than dwell on this book, I'm going to go straight into the next link, if that's okay, because you use the perfect segue again, the word different. So then the next clip is actually a piece of music that I created a while back. I'll precursor it with, there is some naughty language in there, so if you did want to play it in the background, there are some swear words. But Yannick and I talked before we recorded about, you know, being you, and although I swear from time to time, this goes back to the concept of sampling. I listen to a lot of hip-hop and that kind of stuff, so I sampled just audio snippets and put it in my music. So that demonstrates me just taking one thing from there, one thing from another. So yeah, if you wanted to just play a snippet of the clip.
I do that. I'll start it from the top, yeah?
Everybody's mad. This is the year of everybody wants to be a motherfucking gangster.
Everybody on laptops, please take out some headphones now. You can hook this up to some bass. It sounds like we're already hearing half of it. There seems to be a lot going on in the below 120 Hz region.
Yes, there's a lot of sub in there. So the laptops don't do it justice. So yeah, if you're watching this on a replay, go check out the link. Stick some headphones on, or even whack it on a stereo, and you'll feel it as well as hear it.
Outside, everybody else goes on with their lives. Working, making money, getting laid, all that good shit. But in here, time just stops dead. I was into that gang shit for half my life. It's dumb, fucking nowhere shit. Hey, in here, everybody's the same. Everybody.
Everybody's mad. This is the year of everybody wants to be a motherfucking gangster.
Cool.
So the reason I sort of chose one of my own pieces, which kind of could be construed as egotistical, was it demonstrates exactly what we've been talking about so far, in as much that by being different and being me, I created something which was not like anything that I'd ever heard before, let alone other people in the genre of drum and bass. So it came around the time I was working in Bristol. I was working in a record store, and I was friends with a guy who was the art guy, but he also was dabbling in music production. And at the time, I think I was trying to emulate all the other producers. I was saying, well, I can't get my drums to sound like X, or I can't get my bass to sound like Y. And he said, well, I was asking him, how do you make your music? And he said, to be honest, Sam, all I do is just lob a load of samples in and just rearrange them. I was like, oh, that sounds quite easy. So that night I went home, and rather than create something from scratch technically, I got a kick drum from here, I got a bass drum from here, I got a snare from there, got some crazy sub basses in there as well. These were all audio samples. So I wasn't playing on anything on a keyboard. It wasn't created from a synthesizer. These were all snippets of audio. So I rearranged them, and it turned out to be quite cool. But then what happened is I muted the snare track by accident. So a lot of people listen to that track and think, where's the snare? There's no snare in there. And it was a happy accident. So by accidentally clicking a button, I created something that was amazing, in as much that it was like nothing else that had ever been heard before. And when you picked up on that little play about with the hi-hat, again, I still don't know how that happened. That I think when the guys took the tune to go and get it mastered, something happened in the sequencer that the hi-hats went all wonky, and it stayed in. And I said, "What have you done to my hi-hats?" And he's like, "No, you did that." But when you start creating, these happy accidents happen, which then create something which you didn't expect. But until you take action, you never know what's going to happen, or at least you know that nothing's going to happen if you don't take action.
Yeah.
So the reason I jumped straight into this is because this was such a unique piece of music at the time, and we were going back to, I think, 2010. So it's a while ago. My friend, who was the art guy, who also had some music, essentially him and his friends started a record label off the back of this piece of music, because it was so different. And that's what they called the label, was different. They even spelt it DIFFRENT.
Differentmusic.com. Is that still alive?
It's still alive to this day, yeah. So it's still a really it's very niche, but it has that ethos of anything that can't be pigeonholed. A lot of that music gets sent to the different label, and they've got that courage to acknowledge and publish that stuff that is a bit left field. It's still good. It's not like so left field it's just not good. It's just very, very different. And if people want to listen to that style, they know that's like the go-to label.
It's really interesting where these two forces there are between. If something's different, it grabs our attention, and then it has our attention. But what do we do with that attention then? Because people also don't feel quite comfortable with things that are different. That's why most money is still made in the mainstream. But a lot of the different stuff then is so exciting that it replaces the mainstream, because we also get bored very quickly with what we know.
Yeah, and I guess it's that, relating back to the 6 human needs, it's that uncertainty versus uncertainty paradox. You can go a certain route where you're guaranteed to get money, or you can go the uncertain route, which is uncharted territory, which won't guarantee you money, but more often than not, in the long run, it can. But it's your ability to deal with that uncertainty and
it's difficult to put that paradox into words, right?
Yeah, it is. And I think when money comes into the equation, it does change things. You know, if you're looking to create something, but you've got bills to pay, there's going to be a battle there. But then
there's more risk, right? Because the uncertain bit might make you a ton more money. Like, I mean, if you look at, lots of people think, well, should I stay with my job or should I go freelance? Because freelance means it's uncertain, and you're potentially making a lot more money that you could ever make as an employee.
Yeah.
You know, but it is uncertain, and we kind of need both. We don't read the last page of the book first because we like uncertainty. It makes life exciting. It's the stuff that, you know, makes life really, really thrilling. But at the same time, we do love comfort.
Exactly, yeah. So those human needs, it's like there's like a sliding scale. If you go too far one way, you get bored. If you go too far the other way, you're going to be stressed out all the time. So it is quite dynamic within that, and it's finding where you're comfortable with your progress or your contentment, but then also being aware that if you nudge it towards the uncertainty, you'll develop that ability to deal with more uncertainty, which gets you out of your comfort zone more, which means you can then create more, do more, be more, and just progress more, in my opinion.
Yeah. And how does it relate to... No, go on.
No, that's it. Yeah. How does it relate to?
How does it relate to create?
Having the, I guess, the psychological strength to create something that is a bit different or is a bit you. So a lot of people can create stuff, and this goes back to the purple cow. A lot of people can create stuff that's a black and white cow. It's just another black and white cow. Mm-hmm. So I guess it's the courage, and not necessarily the faith, but just even the desire to create that purple cow that is a bit different. It doesn't matter whether you want to try and make money off it. It doesn't have to be a business idea. Just that purple cow's inside you. And you know it is. And it's getting that out, and being willing to go off the beaten track, go a bit underground, do something a bit left field, because that is more you. Mm-hmm. Because everyone's unique. Even if you probably tried to copy someone 100%, you probably wouldn't, because there'll still be elements of you in there, which by its very definition creates a slightly different version. So in terms of creation, it's just a case of get used to being comfortable, being uncomfortable.
Yeah. Yeah. Nobody ever said, oh, look, that's cool. That's like everything else I've ever seen.
Exactly. And that's where you're going to be more content by getting that out of your system, because I'm pretty sure that a lot of people, if not everyone, has something that they want to do, be, create, go. But there's that block or fear of being different. And it relates back to like the caveman brain that we touched upon earlier, that our brains are there to prevent us from being different. Because back in the day when you were a caveman, if you did something different, you would almost be ostracized from the tribe, which meant you lost your food source and you would probably die. So that part of our brain is still running today, but it doesn't need to be.
Yeah.
So it's a case of realizing that, look, what is the worst that can happen if I do create this purple cow? Yeah, maybe one person might go, what is that? But so what? There might be 3 other people that go, that's cool.
Yeah.
But until you create, you won't know.
Yeah, in my experience, and that relates back to the swearing as well, but it's generally about, well, if you do something that's different to what most other people are doing, for every person that you kind of alienate because you're not fitting in with what they would expect, or you do or say something that offends or they take offense with, for every one person that you alienate, you win at least one other person that really, really, really likes you on that basis, because they connect to how you think about the world. Mm-hmm. And it's a scary thing to alienate people and to exclude people from who you're talking to, especially as coaches. We'd like to, in the beginning, every coach likes to work with everybody, because we don't want to exclude anybody. We want to, help people. But at some point you realize, well, the more you try to make it work for everybody, the less you make it work for everybody, because you're spreading yourself too thin. You cannot make everybody happy. For every value or belief, for everything that you think is good, there's going to be one person out there who thinks at least one who thinks you're a despicable human being for even considering that idea.
Yeah.
And even if it's like not hitting your children, or like eating healthy, or like pick anything out of a hat, and there'll be one person who like violently disagrees with you. And anything that you say, which you think, oh, this is a bit different. It's always a risk, because there will be people that like you less on that basis. There will be people judging you, and that's real. They definitely think, oh, what an idiot, he's doing that, or ooh, how embarrassing to just put a video of yourself out there, oh, looking like that. There'll always be some people thinking that. But for each of those, there'll be at least one other who'd say, wow, guts, inspiration, oh, this is really cool, or this is exactly what I thought and never felt like saying. So I would encourage people to embrace the kind of discomfort that comes with being different, and knowing fair well that is difficult, and it certainly did things to me. It's a difficult feeling, but if you learn to embrace that kind of discomfort and that kind of anxiety around being different, I think you can reap some great rewards.
Amen. No, it's very true. Very true. Cool. So going on to the next one then.
What's the next one?
The next one is it's a cultural concept. I mean, I've put a video link in there. We don't necessarily have to watch it. Well, I think it goes on for a while anyway. But this concept that I'm going to bring in now is called minimalism. Which, and we'll put a link in the chat, or that, you know, in
we put it in the show notes.
So minimalism, I've put it in the list because it's not a piece of art, but it's a cultural movement which has had a big influence on me, and it happened around the time when I was doing all my music production and whatnot. I'd lost my job. I was made redundant, and I had a blank canvas, and I didn't know what to do with my life. And I think I'd sort of floated up until I was about 35 anyway. And I was starting to get into personal development, reading books, watching TED Talks, and I stumbled across these guys called the Minimalists. And I watched this YouTube video. I think it's about an hour and a half. And minimalism affected me in as much that it helped me realize what was important in life, and what I was, I guess, aspiring to pre-minimalism wasn't gonna give me that contentment anyway. So minimalism isn't just about, you know, owning 2 things in the world and wearing the same clothes every day and not owning anything. It's finding what's important to you and just stripping it back just to that. So at the time I had a lot of stuff. I mean, I wasn't like in like a traditional corporate job, and I never have been, where, you know, I had a house, a car, and all these gadgets, and I still was unhappy. I just didn't have a direction. But listening to these guys made me realize the importance of, just like human connection, and how much I enjoyed travel and experiences. So I was earning reasonable money at the time, but I was just spending it because I had it. Whereas now I use that money for the stuff that I know is going to make me feel, content. Like, you probably notice I keep saying content instead of happy, because the way I see it is happiness can be quite fleeting. Whereas if you've got like a baseline of contentment, you can stop there. But if you haven't got that contentment, you can go, wicked, I'm happy. And then you can go further down. So that's kind of how I...
More like happiness is your emotional state, and contentment is like a baseline level of kind of having meaning in your life, and overall, on the great scheme of things, life is pretty good just right now.
Exactly, yeah. So off the back of listening to these guys, I got rid of a lot of my possessions, and still to this day, I only actually own about 150 things in the world. Plus the record, I assume. No, I got rid of the records, I'm afraid, mate. Well, this is it. I got rid of all my records. I got rid of all my physical photographs and just scanned them all. Wow, yeah. Because obviously I grew up in the era where we had like pre-digital cameras. So I had half of my collection was on a hard drive, half of it wasn't. But just not having as much stuff just liberated me, in as much that I didn't have clutter. I didn't have stuff that needed cleaning or maintenance. And it just meant I had more money to go and do the stuff that I did enjoy, which at the time was just travel. And as part of that, it's looking at what's important to you. And I realized, just relationships and other people were important. So minimalism basically means figure out what's important to you and get rid of everything else, or at least remove as much as you can or want to. It's all subjective. So that's how it influenced me.
And what is that for you? What's the core?
I think the core is, deep down it just comes down to autonomy. So by not having lots of stuff, I'm able to do what I want when I want, essentially. So that's what I figured was important to me. And also, the human connection. So I've realized, especially lately where I'm living at the moment in Gran Canaria, is the importance of like community and just interacting with other humans. Because working as an online coach, I spend a lot of time on my own, just doing reading or behind a screen like this, talking to another human, but you're not there in person. But just, having that human connection and spending your time deliberately rather than, being reactive. And I guess that's kind of the metaphor for life, is what I try and promote, is be proactive, not reactive. And I look back and I was reactive for 35 years of my life. I ended up getting jobs that just I stumbled across or someone mentioned. I didn't really have a direction. I wasn't unhappy. But I wasn't, there was something missing. And until you know you can't find out what it is that you're missing. And then once you find out what it is you're missing, then you can be deliberate and try and go toward that. Mm-hmm. So it's all, yeah, that's what it is for me.
Excellent. So stripping stuff away from around you so that you can focus on, what's important within you and between people.
Exactly. Yeah. And that gave me good, I guess, physical and mental preparation for the current part of my journey, which is like being part of the digital nomad community. Mm-hmm. So being able to,
that was on your list as well, right?
Yeah, it'll pop down later on, but the minimalism is a big pillar for me in my current situation. So we can talk about more of that on the next one.
Did that open stuff up because you mentioned Ikigai next, and I just love that concept. And it sounds like when you strip a lot of your outer layers away that kind of distract you, you kind of start seeing what's left at the core. And Ikigai for me is something that goes straight to the core.
Yeah.
How do you
I've never actually thought about it like that. I guess it's that inner, it's the self-awareness. It's not necessarily the inner game, it's the self-awareness that the concept of Ikigai.
Do you want to put a frame around it for people who might have never heard about it?
So Ikigai is something, again, when I lost my job, I was doing all this reading, personal development, stumbled across this article, we'll stick a link in, and it's a Japanese word, and it essentially means a reason to get up in the morning. So, excuse me. So in this article, there's 4 Venn diagram, it's a Venn diagram with 4 bubbles. Mm-hmm. What you're good at, what you enjoy doing, what you can get paid for, and what the world needs. Mm-hmm. So I thought, because at the time I had that blank canvas, I thought, oh, hang on a minute. If I can find my sweet spot of those 4, that'll be quite a cool thing. So and I guess I'm still doing it now. That's kind of been my main mission over the last 5 years, is to find my Ikigai. Mm-hmm. And over the course of 5 years, I've tried different careers that kind of ticked some of the boxes but didn't. Others ticks other boxes but not the other one. And I think, at least I found with coaching, for me, I found that sweet spot. I still think it's dynamic. I still think it's going to change. But going back in terms of your question, it's finding out what you're good at, finding out what you love doing. Mm-hmm. So I off the back of this article, I do these things called, I've now, I guess, called them data points. So I make a note of every emotion that happens or triggers me. So like every time I smile or say something out loud or get nervous, I'll make a note of it and have these data points. There's another concept called zone of genius, which is, I think they use it a lot in entrepreneurship. Finding that those things that you do when you lose track of time, you're in the zone, you've got that flow state. I track all of this data, and then by looking at that data, you get more of an idea of who you are and when you're at your best. Because I think someone said to me, the more you are, the happier you will be. And if you've got that in written data form, you've got it's less of an abstract concept. Mm-hmm. So this Ikigai has been my driving mission for the last 5 years. Just find out what I'm good at, what I actually enjoy doing, what I can get paid for. Because I guess Ikigai can be a non-financial thing, but for me, it was trying to find a job after being made redundant. Because I thought, mm-hmm. I don't want to go back and do the same thing. And I've got a blank canvas, which is almost too much, because, well, now I could do any job in the world.
Yeah.
In theory, so it's almost, there was a paradox of choice, and being able to know that what you love doing and what you can get paid for, and particularly what the world needs. Mm-hmm. Because a lot of the times I see people like in jobs where they can get paid for it,
but either they don't really like it, or even when they do like it, the kind of technical stuff, what they do then with their jobs, they don't really believe that this is valuable. There's so many bullshit jobs out there. I mean, that's an actual concept, like jobs that nobody really needs. They're just there to keep people busy. You know, so that's super interesting to start thinking about that, because I see a lot of people working in organizations, and some of the work I do with clients and organizations, the same thing. It's like, well, I'm doing this. I'm really good at it. I get a lot of praise for it. I earn really good money for it, but I don't really see the point, you know, on a higher level. Like, well, what am I doing with my life working for this company who does products that nobody really needs?
Yeah. And again, going back to the human needs, I think the sixth one was contribution. And when I was reading about potential career paths, and I think I was just Googling, you know, how to be happy, you know, things that most people have probably done in there at the time. And there was a common theme in there around, if you're doing a job that either helps someone else or it's outside of your own personal needs, that's going to fulfill you more. So I always knew, as part of my data, that had to be a part of it. And that's where you get that fulfillment. So yeah, you can, so if you look at that Ikigai diagram, you can be amazing at, say, I don't know, I'm just saying, like Google AdWords. You could actually enjoy Google AdWords, and you can get paid a shit ton of money to do Google AdWords. But if you're promoting, I don't know, like say a tobacco company or something, you're not contributing. And people might not realize that.
Well, it depends what you believe in.
Very, very true. But I think that goes back to knowing what you do believe in. So by knowing what's going to help you become fulfilled the most can help make decisions going forward. So I always knew that contribution and doing something for others, because up until that point, I hadn't really done that. You know, I was a nice guy. I never did anything against anyone. But my mum, her main criticism of both my brother and I was, we don't give enough back. Because like my mum grew up as a teacher, she spent her whole life giving. We were never selfish per se, but we weren't givers. So around the time of that, I ended up doing a lot more volunteer work while I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do as a job. But I always knew that the job, or at least the career, not necessarily the job, had to have that element of helping other people or supporting other people in some shape or form.
Yeah, and it just feels so good. And there's now a bunch of research from positive psychology of how kind acts, or like generally being a kind person, not just being grateful, but expressing it and just really doing something good for other people, making other people feel better and happier, has an immense effect on your own well-being. Unless you're completely polar opposite of what you believe in terms of, well, there's people who get enjoyment and other people suffering because they're just so wired in such a specific way from how they grew up. But like for the normal population, and I put that in speech marks, I don't think really that exists, but like if we look at the bell curve, most people really get great benefits from just doing something good for others. And it's astonishing to me to see again and again how little exploration many people have done about what they actually believe in, you know, what they actually find meaningful, what they believe is good and right, you know, and that's why I love having those deeper conversations, because it starts challenging people to actually think about what they believe, or if they've just adopted a message from society or from their parents or from an advertisement.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of what got me into coaching, is by reading about personal development. I did a lot of exercises, and I remember doing the values exercise and the wheel of life before I even knew about the concept of coaching, and found that those two exercises, which I still do every couple of months actually, they keep me on track, because it reminds me what's important to me, where my gaps are, where I want to go. These are all things that are worth thinking about, to give you an idea of how to be in the present and how to plan for the future. Right. So just that article as a whole really kick-started my whole journey of being proactive, because you can read about all this stuff, but as part of that, and in fact, we'll go on to my next one, which is, it's two books, but essentially they're on the same theme, and it's by a guy called Ken Robinson, and the books are called The Element and Finding Your Element. So around that time, I was trying to find my ideal job. I came across these two books, and one of them is more describing the concept. I guess the element is finding when you're in your element. And I guess, again, it goes back to that self-awareness of knowing yourself, like who you really are, not who you think you are or who you might have been 2 years ago or who your parents want you to be, for example. And then, so the second book, Finding Your Element, was taking a more proactive, not stance, but just going out and collecting that data. Rather than just reading about, here's how you could potentially find your perfect job. It's, let's do some work. Let's ask some questions. Let's get some data. Let's question that data. Let's try other stuff, get more data. So
yeah, I think a lot of people get they get stuck in the process of finding their thing, their element, or their values, or whatever it is they're finding for, and they're making an intellectual journey, when actually most people will know what their element is because they've been in it. And when you start exploring those experiences of, when have I felt really good about myself? You know, when was a time in my life that I really enjoyed? And then, you know, deconstruct that a bit and see, oh, what was actually going on there? Why did it feel so good? And then you start getting to, well, oh, this is the element I liked of doing this sport or doing this job, or hanging out with these kind of people, or having this or that kind of experience.
Yeah, definitely.
Then you can produce more of it.
Yeah, and I guess, relating back to create, it's until you do something and create something, you can't open that feedback loop, which then gives you more data when you can think back and, yeah, I really enjoyed that. Okay, well, don't just leave it at that. What is it specifically that you did enjoy about that? And what do you think is driving that? And the more of these action steps you take, the more patterns you see, and you can, or at least this is the way my brain works, is it collates the information and sees the pattern and goes, okay, well, in that case, this is where I need to go, or this is where I'd like to go and explore more, and then I'll go off and do that, and then it might take me somewhere else. But
so part of creation is reflection and exploration. Exactly,
action and reflection. And exploration. Yeah, that's all part of the process, and it's just building those habits to actually create, rather than ponder it, dream it, sketch it, actually create it. And I guess there's a step past that as well, is publish it. Because I did a lot of interviews with perfectionists, because I also, I wouldn't say I still struggle with it, but it's still a part of me has a perfectionist voice. And I figured there's levels to perfectionism in terms of, it's not just a case of a start and a finish line. You've got perfectionists who won't even start because they say, well, if it's not perfect, I'm not even going to start. And you get people that start and get to about here, but they're still, I've got to change this, I want to edit this, or this isn't quite right, and they'll stay in this little area. Then there's people who actually finish the thing, it's created, but then, I can't let anyone see it. What if they think this? So publishing is almost part of that creative process. If you want it to be, if it has to be, if it's purely for your own pleasure, that's great. But if it's like a book or a message or something that you really believe in, and you want to spread it, you've created it, but it's still, it's behind closed doors. So,
well, that's the next exploration, right? How does your creation is in relation or relate to the people around you, the community or the family or the country or the world as at large, because like Ikigai has an element of, does the world need it? Is it good for the world? And the world could be your world, as in your immediate surroundings. But we're always in relation to others. We cannot live in isolation. And I think a lot of creation, like common sense understanding of creation, like if we produce a track or something or write a poem, most people will never see that. So it will never have that kind of ripple effect, other than it helped you and then you are kind of different. And even that will influence other people in some form. But like, I think that I really like that publishing element of it, because if we don't put things out there that we create, whether that's a concept, an idea, an attitude, or a piece of arts and culture, then what's the point?
Yeah, and I think I remember reading, if you don't publish, you're almost being selfish, because these are great ideas which can then go on to inspire others. So my message here today is, create because it's good for you, because it's cathartic, but it's also, it could impact someone else's life.
Right.
They might look at it and go, oh, I mean, the fact that you've just created something, they go, oh, I've got this idea, but I've not actually followed through with it yet for whatever reason. So it's almost, yeah.
There's two things that come into my mind if I put myself into the shoes of somebody who might be thinking radically different from the way that we are. Because like the first thought that came to mind as well, aren't some things just private and maybe they shouldn't be shared? Aren't we living in a too transparent world already?
Yeah, again, it's all subjective. It might be because, you know, when people publicize too much stuff or the wrong kind of stuff, that in itself is a turn off. You know, warts and all documentaries. It depends on, your intent, your message. What are you trying to say? Do you even want to say anything? It doesn't have to be, the creation doesn't have to be a public thing. It could just be, you know, I've always wanted to build my own sofa. You know, that's only going to be for you, but you know, it doesn't have to be public, but it's all subjective. It depends on what you want to do. And that inner voice, that purple cow that's inside a lot of people, it knows whether it's going to be public.
When you build a sofa, you're probably going to have a look around how other people build their sofas. And there's probably going to be some people who filmed themselves making a sofa for themselves and just shared their experiences around building sofas. So in a way, like your story doesn't even have to have a point. Like when people share their experiences or that, like, I really appreciate that. And that's like, God bless the internet, because it's such a massive open space for anybody to publish their experience. And that hasn't existed like that before YouTube, for example, just made it so simple for everybody to share their views. And I totally get the voices that would say, well, a lot of that is just really useless and just random experiences or thoughts being put out there by somebody who's like not very educated. But it's like, it's an experience, and that experience will inspire somebody. And the most uneducated person can really inspire the most educated person to realize that there's people like them out there thinking in this particular way. And maybe just the antithesis sparked some synthesis, you know? So I think it's so valuable that we put experiences out there, because there will always be people who resonate with it. And resonate doesn't necessarily mean that they agree with you on everything that you say or experience. But there's something that's resonating and like something swinging, there's motion out there. And I think that kind of motion is uncomfortable, but really, really, or can be. But it's really important for us to actually grow and develop.
Definitely, yeah. Just, it's almost the thing that it's, I guess coming out of my comfort zone. Like one of the first blog articles I published was around a controversial concept which I came up with, which was using alcohol as a personal development tool. And I was apprehensive about publishing it, but I thought, well, no, this is me. I'm gonna post it, and I did get some I guess negative feedback in some shape or form. But then I also got, like you say, I maybe offended a few people, but for every one of those or two of those, I got 3 or 4 back the other way. So I know it's almost like when you do start getting haters, that's kind of a good sign. and the more obviously if you're just doing shit stuff or evil stuff, you're going to get more haters anyway. But if you're seeing that you're getting that balance, that means you're on the right path. And in fact, I even read something the other day about a blogger that doesn't click publish unless he's nervous, because he obviously hasn't written anything that's a bit vulnerable. And I thought that's quite an interesting concept, because my articles post that first one haven't really resonated much. They've been interesting, but they haven't like polarized or resonated as much. So that's kind of, again, it's that data point, me looking back to 6 months ago going, well, I enjoyed writing that article. I was a bit nervous about it, and it got a good reaction, whereas the other stuff didn't really get much of a reaction. Try posting that up on the board on AA. Well, exactly, yeah. So this is where this is where some of the heat came in. But I guess by making it public, people can decide whether they want to A, read it, or B, take it on, or C, even. But rewind a little bit, because you cannot just drop using alcohol as a personal development tool and then just leave it at that. I mean, I know a little bit about it because we had talked about it at another time. But I think there'll be people out there who are like, what?
getting shit-faced for growth, where do I sign up?
Yes. Okay. So
it. So I think it's worth saying a few words more about it.
Yes. So I'll put a disclaimer at the start of this as well. This is something I've done. I'm not promoting the use of alcohol, but this concept of what I call drunken solitude it's something I've done over the years. And essentially I'll go to a pub or somewhere and I'll have a pint of beer and I'll have a pen and a pad and I'll write at the top of the pad, what do I want?
Mm-hmm.
And I'll just have a couple of sips of beer and just see what comes up. And I've tried this a few times sober, and the results, they don't free flow as much. I found that at least, and it's, I guess it's a fact in terms of like social situations, just being slightly tipsy can lower the inner voices, the barriers, and you can express yourself a bit more freely. So, I mean, I'm just doing this on my own at a table, but I've realized for me that whenever I do these sessions, whatever comes out is what I really want. And I don't have more than 2 pints. It's a controlled, scheduled process that I go through, and whatever stuff I write then forms the basis of my plans for the coming months, because it's what I'm really desiring internally, as opposed to what the logical brain says. Okay, Sam, well, this is what we're going to do.
So it's like a third pint.
Yeah, exactly. So it's almost it's telling that part of your brain that says, oh no, you better not do that, or that's ridiculous, that's crazy. It's just saying to that part of your brain, okay, mate, just go and chill out, go and sit in the corner for a bit. I got this. You can just take an hour off, because a lot of the time it's those voices that immediately pop up when you have this idea of just an idea or something you want to create. Those voices don't exist a lot when you're 1 or 2 pints in. Again, this is how I work. I have a full self-awareness of my tolerance levels. And it also goes back to, I realized when I have 1 beer, I'm more me, which sounds a bit weird, but over the last couple of years, I've almost reversed engineered how I am after 1 beer, because I'm more, I worry less about stuff. I'm not afraid to speak about as much stuff. I'm just a slightly more enjoyable person.
Well, that's why many people have that first drink, just to loosen the tongue, as they say, or like, I mean, it's an inhibitor, and some of the inhibitions that we carry around, and the negative thoughts, and the kind of communication with ourselves, that gets inhibited too. That's why a lot of people have that first kind of drink. So you're saying you reverse engineered Sam after 1 beer, and now you are Sam after 1 beer constantly, but without beer.
Exactly that, Yannick, exactly. So this is the way I got a lot of heat, is people would say, well, you can do that without beer. And it's like, yes, I know. But at the moment, I haven't figured out how to do it. So what I'm doing is putting myself in that mind state, taking the data points. What do I do differently when I'm in this state? Coming back out of it, and then replicating, modeling it. So I called it 1 beer chills, like my nickname's Chills.
Right.
It's like, what does 1 beer chills do that sober Sam doesn't do?
Yeah.
And I've closed that gap now between the two. So by using, I've used alcohol as a personal development tool. We've taken a bit of
have you heard other people's experiences around this, or is there?
Not really. And that's kind of why I wrote the article, is because I've never heard about this.
See how it resonates.
Yeah, exactly. I thought, well, this is what I do. I will be that purple colour. I will talk my talk and walk the walk by not only creating the article, but making it public. This was my first ever properly publicised blog post for my new career as a coach. So it was quite a risky endeavour. But a lot of people resonated with it. And a lot of people said, I've done this before, but never actually knew it had a name. And I guess it didn't have a name. I've just given it a name, given it a process and a format. So again, it goes back to a lot of things you see in other people can be reverse engineered. There is a process. You can look at how they do it and copy them. So again, it goes back to being able to have the courage to just copy other people, or use what you enjoy about what they're doing or creating, and make it work for you.
Very cool. Was there a beer, or like a specific brand, or like a book or something that kind of triggered this idea?
No, it was just, well, in fact, yeah, there was a book, I can't remember, I'll post the link afterwards, but it was a concept I came across called managed solitude, which, I can't remember the name of the book, but managed solitude is putting a time in your diary or your calendar to just go somewhere and think.
Right.
Don't do anything. Don't take a notepad or anything. Just go and think without distractions. See what happens. Sometimes if you've got something you want to ponder, just take yourself into an environment and just think. So it's kind of an extension on that, in as much that it's in the diary. I'll go somewhere. I'm thinking, but I guess I'm using a stimulant to get into a certain mind state, which for me in that purpose is more productive. So I guess it comes from managed solitude initially.
Okay, great.
So, mate, I'm gonna have to pause if that's okay, because I need to get some more water for my throat.
Absolutely, that's fine.
Yo, we're back in.
All right.
Cool. So, next one it's a quote as opposed to an actual piece of media.
Is that from a book or from where's that from, and who's it by?
Well, it's I'm just going to bring it up on screen just so I can pronounce it. It's by bloody pop-ups. Johann Wolfgang von Goethe.
The gute Goethe.
Goethe. So it's quite a big quote. Would you like me to read it, or do you just want me to summarize it?
Yeah, go on.
Okay, so until one is committed, there is hesitancy, the chance to draw back, always ineffectiveness. Concerning all acts of initiative and creation, there is one elementary truth, the ignorance of which kills countless ideas and splendid plans. That the moment one definitely commits oneself, then providence moves too. All sorts of things occur to help one that would never otherwise have occurred. A whole stream of events and issues from the decision, raising in one's favor all manner of unforeseen incidents, meetings, and material assistance, which no man could have dreamed would have come his way. Whatever you can do or dream, you can begin it. Boldness has genius, power, and magic in it. Begin it now. So that it's quite a long-winded quote. I don't actually know the source, and I was actually referred to this quote by, I'd been volunteering in the Philippines, and I was in an airport waiting lounge on the way back. And I was at a moment in my life where I still didn't really know what to do. I'd just done a volunteering stint as part of my contribution thing and really enjoyed it. And I just got chatting to a Canadian guy. He was probably in his 60s. And we were talking about career paths, decisions, and not knowing what to do. And he mentioned this guy. And I don't even think he explained the quote at the time. He just said, there's a quote that might be of interest by this guy, Goethe. Correct me if I'm pronouncing it wrong. I'm guessing it's Goethe, German origin, yeah.
Yep.
But essentially, what I took from this quote is, until you actually commit to do something, I guess you'll never know what could potentially happen. So what I realized that is, if you just take action and open up that feedback loop, there's things might happen which you will never predict, which could change the course of your life. But you don't know, you can't possibly predict what those things might be until you take action. You can sort of hypothesize, but until you go and do that thing or create that thing or publish that thing, you never know what could happen. And usually these are good doors that open. So I kind of use this quote, just the word commit. I almost use it as a mantra, just commit. So it doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to commit to this for the rest of my life. It just means commit to actually taking action, taking a step, doing that thing, creating that thing. Because, you hear stories about people who just, they'll do a random YouTube video, which then led to them being interviewed on TV, which then led to them being a book deal. And then getting involved with a charity, and then doing this. They would never have predicted any of those 6 steps before they made that YouTube video. So that's kind of what I get from this quote, is the excitement of not knowing what could happen, but knowing that nothing will happen if you don't do anything. And I think you and I have discussed this before. Obviously, stuff can still happen, but if you're being proactive, you almost create a set of dominoes that suddenly appear. As soon as you take action, there's metaphorical, invisible dominoes ahead of you. And every action you step hits another one, which can take you on an exciting path. I mean, to me, that excites me, that unknown possibility. And I like to label all of my concepts. And I think this one is deliberate serendipity.
Right.
So deliberately putting yourself in those situations where stuff could happen.
I have this image of the dominoes falling, and then at some point you stand there and everybody else has fallen. And I'm like, what have I done? It's interesting. I mean, what I really like is the emphasis on begin, because a lot of people, they think commitment, and they think, oh, I'm making a decision for the rest of my life. I need to see through to the end. I need to persist. Persistence is key, and you just need to stick with something long enough and persevere through all the times that you fall, and stand up again. Just commit to it, And I think that's a really scary concept. And I think that's why the concept is so scary. To if you commit to something, if you make a decision that's there for the rest of your life, you're still you're going to do something now and then deal with the consequences of that choice for the rest of your life. That's a heavy commitment. And I think most commitment isn't really like that. That's why I like the emphasis on begin, and what you say, it starts with an intention. And somebody told me once, everything starts with an intention. And that intention is towards the end, towards some sort of ending or end goal or something in the future. But if you just begin, this is how you beat pretty much 90% of procrastination. You just start, and then you stick with it. Because most procrastination gets dealt with just by beginning. And if we can get rid of our fear of seeing commitment as something that's going to stick with us for the rest of our lives, rather an opportunity to commit to something for the rest of our lives, but not necessarily having to. If we just start, things will happen. And then we can take it from there. It's really interesting. It's commitment. Is commitment something that is an end point, a result, a product, a relationship, a marriage, or something like that we commit to? Or is it just a commitment towards an action, and then doing it fully and just begin with all that you've got?
Yeah, I think that's the way I took it, was commit to just starting, to actually doing, not thinking about it, planning, actually take that first step, whatever it is.
Taking action, great.
And you said something interesting there about fear and getting rid of the fear. So what I've realized on part of my journey is that the fear is always going to be there. So I think this is a misconception that people maybe think some people are fearless. To me, that I don't believe that's the case. I would say that fear is always there. They've just worked out how to work with it. So I think feeling that fear and knowing that it's never going to go away is almost, it's relieving, because you can almost self-flagellate yourself for still having that fear. So I just want to stress to people that fear's always, it is always going to be there. You might look at other people and think, yeah, but they don't look nervous, or they don't look scared. There's still a part of them in their body that's feeling that. They're just overriding it. So the way I see it, and your view might differ on this actually, is you can't ever get rid of fear. And I think when people talk about having fears around creation, they have an idea that they have to get to that stage where fear doesn't exist. I don't believe that's the case. I believe it's, again, being comfortable with that discomfort of the fear, knowing where that fear comes from, because a lot of the time it is irrational. I mean, it's there for a reason to keep you safe, but in the context of what you're trying to do, you can override it. You can just say, okay, fear, I know why you're here. Cheers for being here, but I got this.
Trying to protect me. Thanks very much.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's almost just acknowledge it.
Yeah.
But I think it's a misconception that you can get rid of fear, and unless there is some psychological miswiring somewhere. I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, but that's my opinion, at least.
Yeah, I think much of what you call fear would call anxiety, which is basically fear without an object. Like if you walk down a dark alleyway and somebody comes up with a gun and holds it to your head, you have a fear of dying because of their gun.
Yeah.
If it's a dark alleyway and there's a gang of hooded youth and they're talking to each other and you have to pass them, then that's anxiety because, you know, there might be super nice people and not even look up. Or greet you nicely. But like it's something that might or might not happen. And I think a lot of what people call fear is actually anxiety is actually something that is the uncertainty that is the anxiety rather than an actual tangible outcome of something.
Very true, yeah.
And Nick, I had this conversation with Nick at some point because I do believe that there's a base level of anxiety just because we're human beings and we live with all of these paradoxes and inner conflicts, and you know I think that's something we always carry with us, and sometimes we don't think about it or we're too distracted or you know I don't think some of these anxieties can be transcended. I know many of these anxieties and fears they can just disappear by getting better at something or more used to it or educating us about something. Like for example what Nick Bolton, he was giving the example of somebody who goes up to give a speech or do a training. You know, the first time you have a lot of fear, a lot of anxiety, you know, things might go wrong, they might ridicule you. Like Tony Robbins said that in his movie. It's like, do you still get nervous? Which is basically anxiety. He's like, nah, because he's done it so many times. He knows he can deal with everything that comes up. Perhaps after the Me Too incident, he gets a little nervous again. But generally, I agree with you. A lot of us we just suppress it, and it's always kind of there underneath the surface, and we just learn to manage it, accept it, or embrace it. Perhaps. Yeah. I think we can do a lot with the fear and anxiety that we feel. Not with all of it. I think there's a base level, but a lot of this anxiety and fear we can befriend or pacify or get to know better. Like a lot of the people that we're scared of, once we get to know them better, we realize that they're just people wanting to do a good thing, you know, and then it takes the fear away, you know, it's gone because we know them better now. Yeah.
And like it relates back to that, the comfort zone that we were talking about is that there is no anxiety when you're in your comfort zone. So for, you know, someone to do their first ever public speech, they're going to feel that anxiety and that the fear will be there. But then after the fourth or fifth, I agree, the fear probably isn't there. But there's still a potential fear if they then go and speak to like another 100 people. So it's not like fear as a concept suddenly dissipates once you master fear. That's kind of what I was getting at.
And there's always that one gig after 100 where all of a sudden somebody challenges you and you screw it up, or like you say something and like all of a sudden there's a crowd who fundamentally disagrees with that one thing that you really stand for. And then, a lot of that can come back, you know.
But I think this is where, I guess that Goethe quote comes in, and also one of my final points, which we'll come to later, about committing for the rest of your life. So we'll sort of bracket that and stick that for there, but we'll refer to it again later on. So the next one on my list is. It's a travel series, so I guess it's part of Culture by a guy called Anthony Bourdain, who's an American. He actually started out as a chef and then ended up writing a book around what it was like to be a chef growing up. And I think he was also a heroin addict as well, which I didn't know any of this once I started watching his programs. But the reason I've got these two programs, which are called No Reservations and Parts Unknown, which are his two most popular series, is it was a travel show that I hadn't sort of come across before. My American friend, he comes over every couple of years and he's like, hey, check out this show, check out this. And he shows me like a lot of stuff. Half of it is like, because it's just American, like the sense of humor is different and it doesn't resonate. I mean, I'm sure it resonates for other people, but then every now and again he'll bring me something and I'll be like, wow, this is wicked. and Anthony Bourdain as a whole was one of those guys. And how these programs impacted my life and also my attitudes was it wasn't your bog standard travel program. He would go to the non-textbook destinations. He would go and speak to the people. He would understand the culture. He would dive in on the history a bit as well. So not only would you learn about the destination, you learn about everything that encapsulates that destination, which I guess travel shows, because they're more visual, don't cover. So I learned a lot, not only about other destinations, but also about how to interact with other people that are quote different from you.
Yeah.
Because I mean, I grew up like on the English side of the Welsh border. There wasn't many different cultures for me growing up. So that's probably why I found hip hop so fascinating, is because it was completely different to anything I'd ever seen before.
Mm-hmm.
And part of the way that I enjoyed how Bourdain did his shows was he would just talk to local people. You know, he wouldn't go to like the main tourist destinations. He would go out of town, learn a bit more about the food, which also interested me, but he would just have chats with people, and I think it was the conversations that intrigued me. So it kind of, again, relates back to the PUA stuff and the traits of being good socially,
Mm-hmm.
which impacted me.
Yeah, and when you're traveling, you're by definition different, you know, because you're not from there. And I think it takes a lot of guts to go travel, you know, because you're going to have to own you being different, because depending on where you go, you just can't hide it anymore. And that will always freak some people out and make some other people curious. You know, there's a lot of these things involved that you've been talking about for the last 2 hours. You know, there's like, that's the epitome of being different, is to go travel on your own. Yeah,
and I think it's just dawned on me now when people say I'm going to go find myself. That's kind of what you're doing, is because I guess you're taking yourself outside of that environment that you were brought up in, which has probably molded you to some degree, and you're seeing who you are outside of that environment. Are you still the same person? Do you start to think differently? Do you start to see things differently?
Of course you will. I think it's inevitable because, like, well, we always, like, depending on your school of thought, we're always seeing us through the eyes of other people.
Mm-hmm.
So when we go travel, it's inevitable that we're gonna feel differently and be differently, because like it's going to be an experience if we meet so many people. If we don't travel in solitude and we just kind of look at the sights and then go back to our hotel room, if we actually travel and engage with a different culture, they're going to see us in a specific way through their paradigms and their perspectives. And then it's inevitable that we adopt some of what they see in us. You know, I think that's why coaching and traveling are so powerful experiences. Because somebody else is going to see you through their lens and share that with you in some way. And some people get weirded out and some people feel really embraced, but it's certainly going to do something for you. So bring that together with the solitude that you describe, you know, with like traveling as an act of creation, of like going out there and engaging and like, you know, making something swing, putting yourself out there. If you're not just kind of a super passive traveler who just takes everything in, but you're actually engaging, that's a powerful experience. And I think like we talked about at the top, the creations don't have to be a piece of art. They could be an experience, they could be a moment, it could be a dialogue between two humans. These are classified as creations because they didn't exist before, right? And I think that you mentioned the word paradigm there, and I think that's what traveling in general has helped me do, is understand other people's paradigms and realize when I'm looking at their paradigm through my paradigm. So again, it's that self-awareness and understanding the cultural differences and societal differences, and that different doesn't necessarily have to be boring or interesting. It just is. So I think it's helped me be less judgmental. Because I think as part of my training, we're trained to be non-judgmental in our sessions, and I realized by my self-reflection that I was actually being quite judgmental outside of coaching. I was holding the space brilliantly. You know, people would say things every now and again, and which might provoke a reaction, but in that space it doesn't happen. But I noticed outside I was just dismissing a lot of things, and I realized that I was missing a lot of opportunities by instantly dismissing a person, place, or a thing as either boring or interesting. Because if you say, that's boring, that's 50% of life
and I guess potential opportunities which you're throwing out the window before you've even got to know anything more about them. So, you know, like you talked about the attackers in the alleyway, that element of curiosity drives me. That it's just, I wonder what these guys are up to, or, you know, I wonder what that thing is over there. So these travel programs,
even after all this hip hop education.
Yeah, true. Yeah, it's like, yeah, I know they're going to be jacking me for my wallet
or your beats.
My beats, yeah.
No, but that's the thing. I mean, it's we're joking, but like this person that you meet and you dismiss as boring might just be boring and waste 10 minutes to 10 hours of your life. You know, maybe you're a people pleaser and all of a sudden you get sucked into this project because you didn't follow your initial hunch of, I don't think that's for me, but I don't really want to say no.
Yeah.
You know, that person that you're curious about that looks funny or interesting might just take your watch and your phone and stab you. You know, you don't know where life is going to be taking you. So I'm not an advocate of like following your hunches absolutely everywhere and always conquering your fear. Fear is a very useful, valuable place in our survival. You know, if we feel disgusted, we don't eat it. If we feel fearful, we don't go there, or we fight or we flight. You know, that's useful, but I think a lot of that stuff isn't useful anymore. So I think our instincts, our hunches, there's so many people that always follow your gut, always follow your instincts. There's good research out there of like Daniel Kahneman's thinking fast and thinking slow lays them out a lot. A lot of our instincts are wrong. Like if we go to a nightclub and we see some cool people, they're probably not going to kill us. You know, actually it's very, very unlikely that we're going to get hurt or seriously embarrassed in that situation. You know, like a lot of the times people don't kill us and take all of our stuff. You know, a lot of the times there's something very interesting in that person we met who we dismissed. So I think our instincts and gut feelings are something to listen to, evaluate, and then make a decision like based on taking all of our elements in.
I agree wholeheartedly, yeah, because that's kind of what I've discovered personally myself over the last couple of months is the concept of intuition and spirit and these kind of things wasn't even on my radar like 6 months ago. I was purely analytical, logical, you know, just brain was processing. And I did, I guess I've come into contact with a lot of people that, I mean, yeah, someone mentioned body, mind and spirit. That third option, again, I guess I was always dismissing it. I was like, spiritual, I'm not religious. These were my words. I was like, I'm not religious. That's not really my thing. But now I'm realizing that spirit is that intuition. And now I've started listening to it, but also using it alongside the brain. So I guess you could consider it like a heart and a brain combination, because previously I was just logical and finding myself lost. And obviously, yeah, if you then go purely heart, you can get yourself into some trouble, or you know, it's some maybe situations that aren't going to be productive. But this is what I'm finding now is if you use the two, like use that inner feeling of, I really want to go and do that, or I want to go and speak to that person, but then also use your brain to go, well, actually he's holding a knife, it's probably not a good idea. You know, or
oh, what a beautiful knife.
Yeah, exactly. So I think using the two in tandem, and again, just being aware of both, because if you're aware that one controls the other more often, then you can make your decisions more appropriately, or more effectively is probably the word. Again, it's all subjective, but that's what I found. So So going back to like the travel show, and I guess by watching all these travel shows, some of them resonate with me more than others. So part of me would look at that show and go, I want to go there. So I would then create a list. There you go. I've created a list, and I would then create the time and then create the experience to go and do it. So off the back of this guy's shows, I learned a lot more about other parts of the world, which I would have normally dismissed as boring. So I used to watch all episodes, irrespective of whether I'd either been there before or thought the country or place was less interesting. And then that created my life up until that point. You know, I'm lucky that I've traveled to 66 countries in the world, mainly off the back of them being uncovered by this guy and being inspired by seeing other people documenting their creations and thinking, I'd like to do a bit of that. So that's kind of, again, goes back to create something because it might inspire other people. Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Right, so we're almost at the end of the list. We have, next is, I'll put some links in as well, but this is another sort of cultural movement, which I've called I guess it's digital nomad / remote work / location independence.
Mm-hmm.
This one
nicely on from the traveling.
It does, yeah. So going back to, it relates to the traveling and also the minimalism that we touched upon earlier. Being location independent means you can do your work from anywhere. That's essentially it. You don't have to be in a specific geographic location. Mm-hmm. If you've got a load of stuff, that ability to move around is less. So this is how it helps me, is that because I don't own that much stuff anyway, and I have the ability to live out of a 40-litre backpack for a year, I am fully location independent. I can go anywhere and just pack my bag. All this equipment, which you can't see at the moment, is all travel versions of equipment most people have. Mm-hmm. So this is a concept I came across, again, around the time I lost my job. I think I was just Googling things like how to get paid to travel, because I always knew travel was something I wanted to do. It was such a big abstract concept. But I distinctly remember seeing an image of a laptop with like a pina colada or something and a palm tree in the beach. I was like, wow, that looks cool. And I think I made a note of it and maybe did a bit of reading about it, maybe listened to a few podcasts. But at the time, I didn't know what job I wanted to do anyway. So I kind of put that on the back burner. And I always knew, so we talk about the Ikigai Venn diagram, uh-huh. What you're good at, what you enjoy doing, what you can get paid for, what the world needs. I actually added another one of mine on there. Can it be location independent? Can I do it from anywhere?
Interesting.
So over those 5 years, I tried different careers around, music production, photography, NGO work, and then I ended up in coaching. And when I got to the coaching, I guess I incorrectly assumed, well, I can't really make that location independent because I've got to physically sit in front of another human to talk to them. Uh-huh. And then once I realized, well, actually, no, a lot of people use Skype and Zoom. I was like, is that a fact? That means I can now do this online. So that's exactly what I do. So this is an idea it just came from a screenshot, and it's now my lifestyle is I'm an online life coach, for want of a better word, but I have that location independence to do it from anywhere. So you're in London as we speak. I'm in Gran Canaria. I've got palm trees like 100 meters behind me. and that's something I've created because I knew what I wanted. I knew how to get there, and I took little steps. It took me 5 years to get here. So again, it relates back to all we've talked about previously. It wasn't like, I want to work on a laptop and sit on a beach all day. It wasn't that simple. It was trying different paths, taking action, learning what I didn't like about those other 3 or 4 careers prior, and taking that data, which now leads me to being... Someone pointed out to me, I'm not actually a digital nomad because technically I don't travel and work at the same time. I'll do one or the other.
Oh, right.
So I guess technically I'm location independent, but where I am, I chose this place, because the weather's good. So it's, it's middle of November. I'm wearing a t-shirt and it's sunny outside. So because of that, there's a lot of digital nomads here, and they're also other people doing inspiring work. So some of them are like basically any career that you can do online where you don't have to be in an office. So I was inspired by this movement years ago, but didn't think it was possible. And now I'm meeting other people that are doing it, and they're inspiring me, and I'm getting ideas by speaking with them. What are you up to? I'm doing this. Or we just go and meet for coffee. So just creating a conversation can create ideas for you to create other stuff, which then help other people create their ideas. So again,
I see how that relates.
It's a domino effect again. So
and it's making something out of nothing. It's like all of your 5 bubbles of Ikigai +1. It's committing to something. It's traveling. It's creating. I can see how that relates to everything that you're talking about. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and also I think as part of this, as a movement, how it's influenced me is I found my tribe finally. You hear the phrase, you know, find your tribe. With hindsight, I look back and I didn't find it in drum and bass music. I enjoyed the music, but they weren't my kind of people. I was always the odd one out who wasn't doing drugs. I just drank. It wasn't my thing. Not saying that everyone is into drum and bass does drugs, but I didn't feel like I fit there.
Mm-hmm.
The same when I did NGO work. It's a certain type of person that does that work. They sacrifice a lot because the hours are crazy. They're in environment. I was doing like disaster relief, so working with like typhoons and earthquakes essentially. But I guess they were my tribe in as much as they were the kind of people, but the kind of work was different. Whereas here, the kind of people that are digital nomads and location independent people, they are by their very nature open-minded because they've come out of society, you know, that 9-to-5 job. They've followed that inner voice to go and do what they want, where they want. It's not always an easy thing. It's like, it's not all palm trees and laptops. There's a lot of sacrifices. You know, I've never owned a house. I'm coming up to 40. I don't have a car. I move around a lot. So there's sacrifices, but as part of this inner journey, this inner work, I know what's important to me. And I know that being around these communities that are popping up around these digital nomad hubs all around the world is a movement that I'm inspired by. So I went to, there was a conference here a couple of months ago called Nomad City, all about remote work, location independent lifestyle. And listening to the guys do the speeches made me think, I want to do that. So listening to what they've created has made me want to create something myself. So again, it ties back into that inspiration thing, which, yeah, it drives me. Yeah, I think I also have that inner desire to create. If I'm not creating, I know something's not right. In fact, create is one of my values now. That's how important it is to me.
Oh, excellent. That's really good to hear.
Cool. Thank you. No, but again, it's been a process, and it hasn't been a straight jump to it. It's been a journey. And this kind of leads us on to the final thing that we'll talk about today, which is, it's a book called The Lean Startup by a guy called Eric, I would say Rice, or it could be Reese. The book itself wasn't massively influential, but it has a concept in there which is now really a big part of not just how I operate, but how I'd like to encourage others to take this journey of creation. And it's the concept of the minimum viable product. Mm-hmm. So the Lean Startup is essentially about how to start a business with as little resources as needed. I guess it's minimalism for business. Mm-hmm. It's looking at what can you create that gets the job done. It might not look the best. It definitely won't be the final thing, but it's an operational, I guess it can be tangible thing that you've created just to get you started. Mm-hmm. So this concept of the minimum viable product, the MVP, I'd always come across it in business, but now I'm doing it with my creations.
So the smallest thing you can commit to and begin with.
Exactly, yeah. So I guess that when you look at my career path, the MVP was just to go and start doing something, and be aware that you can, in fact, the point of it is to iterate. So when you're creating, it's never going to be the perfect thing straight off the bat. Mm-hmm. And when we talk about commitment, it doesn't have to be for the rest of your life. Mm-hmm. You can just start, create, open the feedback loop, see what happens, and then iterate, change it. That doesn't work. That kind of, this is great, let's do more of this. Or actually, I don't want to do any of this. This is actually what I want to do. But I didn't know this thing existed until I created that. So the whole concept of MVP is a constant dynamic iteration. Stick to the basics. What is it actually needs to be done? What's the critical factors this creation needs for it to be classed as a creation? So I guess, like in terms of, I guess anything, you can look at it, and a lot of stuff when people create, they want it to like look perfect. They want it to feel really good. And these are kind of like extracurricular things which can come at a later date. But what's the basic core thing that this thing needs for it to be a thing?
Right.
So it's kind of an abstract. I'm trying to think of some examples. So if you had, I want to create a table, and you're thinking, it's going to be like mahogany. It's going to have like runners and candles, and that's great. But like the MVP of a table, what does it actually need? Okay, a flat surface, and not even 4 legs. I guess you can get away with 3 legs.
Or
so
one.
Even that, or even 1, or even none. You could stick it to a wall and just drill it in. Mm-hmm. So essentially, the MVP of a table is flat surface. So that concept of just drilling down to what actually is required makes the first step easier, because you can get away with it with just doing that.
Yeah.
So I said to you, yeah.
Now, how did that influence you? It sounds like quite an insight at a time that was important to have.
It influenced me because as part of I wasn't being creative. Like over the last couple of months, I was writing these blog articles, mm-hmm. and I wanted them to be really concise with all these elements in. And then my perfectionism at the time was overwhelming. It was frustrating, and it meant that I not only didn't enjoy writing the articles anymore, but it was preventing me from finishing them or publishing them. Mm-hmm. So I wasn't creating, and that was directly in conflict with that inner desire to create. Right. So the MVP is, I guess, when you're looking at the blog articles, is what am I trying to say here? What do I want the audience to leave with? Huh. So if you strip everything else back and just answer those 2 questions, you could probably do that in 2 sentences. Mm-hmm. And taking away that overwhelm, all those fears of, but it won't quite be what I imagine. Mm-hmm. That's the whole concept. That's the whole point of an MVP. Is like, yes, it won't be like that, but having something to show for it is a start, and it gets you that first step. Because once you have that first iteration, the feedback loop's open. You can say, okay, well, I can change this. And in this modern day and age, especially when it comes to blog articles, it's digital. You can create and publish it within an hour. Mm-hmm. And if you think, actually, I'm going to change it, you can go back in and do it. So it isn't for the rest of your life. You don't, that level of commitment or that anxiety doesn't have to be there. It isn't there. Mm-hmm. And by doing more of these things, you then realize, maybe I don't want to commit to the rest of my life. I'll go and do something else over here. And that's okay. I think it's just being aware that there's no shame in changing path or iterating. Mm-hmm. It will happen. And it's interesting, when I did a speech recently at one of we have like a coffee club here every Friday, and my parents listened to my talk, and they looked at my career path as me skipping randomly into careers. I'm going to do this now. I'm going to be a photographer. I'm going to be a DJ. I'm going to go and live in Ecuador and help people with earthquakes. From the outside, that's flitting and lack of commitment. But in my head, it was in a series. It was me going, try this, do this, move here. And when they listened to that talk, they were like, oh, that's what he was doing. So I hadn't thought of it that way. But there's no shame in trying. You're better off trying and failing than, in fact, my flatmate and I were talking about relationships and stuff the other day, and I came up with this quote. I said, it's better to try and to cry than to die and not try. So just give it a go is the main message. What's the worst that can happen? It's probably nowhere near as bad as what your brain thinks it might be. So that's pretty much my list, bro. So
Thank you, Sam. I could just leave it here, or we could talk for another 4 hours for all of the bits you just referenced and all of the things I came across. It's such an empowering message to, embrace a bit of uncomfortable and uncertainty and go forward with your path and commit to beginning, and then see where this domino effect takes you, even if you don't know it. And you might know very well, but in the end, it always comes different than you think. And also to be able to sum up the essence and the core of something, I think is a really powerful message. A lot of companies spend a lot of time, money, and effort to figure out what their why is and what drives them. People do the same. We're an organism as an organization. We're not so far apart in terms of what we have to make happen, how complex we are. But like, drill these things down to the essence, and then just going for it with courage, going through life, and embracing difference, and creating something out of nothing. Publishing as part of creation, and with a lot of bass to it. I really like that message of you, and you summed it up perfectly. So thank you very much for giving us an insight into your cool intentions.
No, thank you very much for giving me the platform. It's been really cool just to talk about these things, and for me to see how they link together, and then just talking about them has made me realize they are all part of that same concept and part of that journey. And I guess I hope that people either listen or read some of this and they go and create. I'm not even going to say what my initial message was. I'm just going to leave it as create and let other people create what they want from this. So it's been a pleasure just talking about this stuff, mate, honestly.
Excellent. You mentioned your life coach. You mentioned you've done some writing, you've done some music production. Do you want to drop some links in the show notes, or do you want to tell people where they can find you?
I'll do a bit of both. Website is samchillcott.com. So that's CHILLCOTT.com. My old SoundCloud was under Chills Beats, so CHILLS and then Beats. Instagram, Sam Chillcott, but I'll stick all the links in as well. And all my blog articles are in on the website as well. So that's where you can find me on the socials.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Sam. It was fucking brilliant to talk to you, and I'm sure we do this again sometime.
Likewise, mate. Good luck. Thanks very much, and have a good one.
Cheers. Bye.
See you, Yannick. Bye-bye.